Nobody expected Eala to walk onto that court and do what she did. Against a top 10 player in front of thousands, she didn't just compete, she detonated. One match, one moment, one girl from Manila who rewrote every expectation the tennis world had set for her. But here's the thing nobody is talking about. What happened before the match might be more shocking than the match itself. This is the story of how Eala shocked the world and why the tennis establishment still hasn't recovered. There is a particular kind of silence that fills a tennis stadium when someone walks onto the court and nobody, not the crowd, not the commentators, not even the ball kids, believes they belong there. Eala had heard that silence before. She had walked through it at junior tournaments in Europe, where her name was mispronounced on the draw sheet. She had felt it at qualifying rounds, where opponents looked past her during warm-up as if she were already gone. She had carried it from Manila to Madrid to Miami, this quiet, invisible weight of being the girl from Southeast Asia who was supposed to be grateful just to be there. But here is what those people never understood about Eala. She was never just grateful to be there. She was there to win. Born in 2005 in the Philippines, Eala grew up in a household where tennis was not a hobby, it was a calling. Her father, Michael, a former national player himself, saw something in his daughter before anyone else did. Not just talent, which she had in abundance, but a rarer quality. Composure, that ice-cold ability to slow time down when everything around you was speeding up. At 13, she did something almost no Filipino athlete had done before her. She earned a spot at the Rafa Nadal Academy in Monaco, Spain. Think about what that means. A teenage girl flying across the world, training alongside some of the most gifted young players on the planet in a system built by one of the greatest champions in tennis history. She didn't just survive it, she thrived. By 17, she had won the ITF Junior World Championship in doubles. By 18, she was cracking the top 200 in the WTA singles rankings. By 19, she was making noise at Grand Slams, pushing past qualifiers, winning matches she had no business winning on paper, and losing a few she should have won, the way every great player does in those formative years when the gap between promise and performance is still being closed. The Philippine tennis community didn't just support her, they worshipped her. Billboards, national news coverage, government recognition. Every single match she played was streamed across the archipelago, watched by fans who saw in her not just a tennis player, but a mirror, a reflection of what a Filipino could be on the world stage. But outside the Philippines, the tennis world was polite about Eala. They acknowledged the junior titles, they noted the rankings climb, they said things like, she has a bright future, and she's one to watch. What they never said, what they never truly believed, was that she could walk into a tournament, face a player ranked inside the top 10 in the world, and make that player work for every single point. Until the day she did exactly that, and nothing in women's tennis has been quite the same since. When the tournament draw was released and Eala's name appeared in the same bracket as the top 10 seed, the reaction was almost universal. Sympathy. Not cruelty, just the quiet, patronizing kind of sympathy that can be more suffocating than outright dismissal. Commentators on tennis podcasts called it a tough draw for Eala. Social media fans from the Philippines flooded comment sections, still optimistic, still loyal, but privately bracing for the worst. Even neutral tennis observers, the kind who chart statistics and track head-to-heads, looked at the matchup and shrugged. It was going to be over in straight sets, maybe an hour, maybe less. Her opponent that day had everything Eala did not. On paper. She was a top 10 player, a veteran of multiple Grand Slam quarterfinals, and a woman who had beaten former world number ones. She was older, stronger, and had spent a decade building the kind of mental armor that only comes from surviving hundreds of high-pressure matches. Her serve was a weapon. Her backhand was clinical. Her movement around the court was so efficient it looked almost bored. She had also won prize money in a single season that exceeded Eala's total career earnings. The morning of the match, a prominent tennis analyst posted a breakdown online. It was thorough, it was data-driven, and it concluded, politely, professionally, that Eala had approximately a 12% chance of winning. 12%. That number circulated on Filipino social media almost immediately, and it did something interesting. It didn't break the fans, it lit them up. Because here is what that analyst didn't measure. He didn't measure the fact that Eala had been quietly working with a new coach who had overhauled her serve mechanics over the previous 4 months. He didn't measure the hours she had spent studying her opponent's tendencies on faster surfaces, noting the slight hesitation on the backhand return when the ball came in deep to the body. He didn't measure the mentality of a young woman who had been told, in subtle and not-so-subtle ways, her entire career that she didn't quite belong and had responded every single time by stepping onto a tennis court and making the case herself. Eala arrived at the stadium that morning without a word to the press. No interviews, no social media posts. Just a training session, a meal, and a walk through the locker room with the kind of quiet focus that her teammates had learned to recognize. It was the look she got when she had already played the match in her head 100 times and liked how it ended. The crowd filling the stadium had come to see the top 10 player. The television cameras were trained on the top 10 player. The narrative of the day was built entirely around the top 10 player. Eala walked out onto that court knowing she was the footnote. She intended to become the headline. The first set went to the top 10 player, but not easily. Not the way anyone predicted. Eala broke serve in the third game, a moment that sent a jolt through the crowd that was equal parts surprise and electricity. She lost the break back 2 games later, which felt right, felt expected, felt like the natural order asserting itself. And then she broke again. Held, and suddenly it was 5-4, and the stadium noise had shifted into something different, something alert and uncertain. She lost the first set in a tiebreak. 7 points to 4. And still, nobody panicked because losing a tiebreak to a top 10 player is what young players do. You get close, you flinch, you walk to the changeover with something learned and nothing won. That's the script. Eala threw the script away in the second set. She came out aggressive in a way that confused her opponent at first. Not reckless, calculated aggression, the kind that says, I have mapped your game, and I am attacking the gaps. She was hitting her forehand with an angle and an early ball timing that disrupted her opponent's rhythm completely. The top 10 player, to her credit, adjusted, but Eala adjusted back, and then adjusted again. It was like watching 2 chess players, except one of them was a teenager from Manila who wasn't supposed to be at this level yet. The moment that broke the internet, because there's always a moment, came at 5-5 in the second set. Deuce. Add out. Match point pressure building like weather. Eala had a second serve coming at her, and she made a decision that most players wouldn't dare make in that situation. She stepped inside the baseline, she took the ball early, absurdly early, almost interrupting it, and drove a cross-court forehand winner past a stunned opponent who had no time to move. The crowd erupted. Not politely, not with appreciation, with something that sounded closer to disbelief. Eala held her nerve, won the game, won the set, and suddenly the match was level. 2 sets, everything to play for. The commentators scrambled. The statistical models revised themselves in real time. Twitter, or whatever platform was currently absorbing the world's collective shock, was overwhelmed with clips of that forehand, replayed, slowed down, analyzed, celebrated. In the third set, the top 10 player raised her level, because that is what great players do. They absorb a shock, reset, and come back harder. And she did come back harder. Eala was pushed. She was tested. She dropped serve once and had to break back immediately, which she did with a forehand down the line that drew a barely audible murmur of admiration even from the sections of the crowd that hadn't come to support her. The final scoreline matters less than what it represented. Whether Eala won or lost the match, and we'll let you search that for yourself, she had already accomplished something irreversible. She had stood across the net from one of the best players in the world and made her feel every single point. She had played tennis so precise, so brave, and so beautiful that the conversation about her career would never again include the phrase, "one to watch," as though she were some distant theoretical promise. She was here. She was real, and the tennis world had just been introduced to who she actually was. The aftermath of the match was loud and messy, and if you were watching closely, revealing in ways that had nothing to do with tennis. The praise came first, and it was overwhelming. Players from around the tour posted reactions. Coaches who had seen Eala at the academy quietly told journalists they weren't surprised. Filipino athletes across every sport flooded social media with pride. Trending topics exploded. The hashtags were untranslatable in their joy. The raw, full-body relief of a fan base that had believed for years and finally had proof to hand to the doubters. But then came the shade, and this is where things got interesting. An anonymous post, later traced to someone close to the defeated player's camp, though never confirmed officially, appeared on a popular tennis forum, suggesting that Eala had been lucky with the net cord at two crucial points in the second set, that her game plan was defensive and reactive rather than proactive, that the result was flattering for someone at her stage. Now, anyone who watched the match would tell you this was not just wrong, it was spectacularly wrong. But facts have rarely been the primary ingredient in tennis controversies. The post circulated, it got screenshotted, it got quote retweeted with varying degrees of outrage, and it reopened a conversation that the tennis world has been having, quietly, uncomfortably, for years. The conversation about which players get credit for their performances and which players get their performances explained away. A prominent European commentator during a post-match analysis segment praised Eala's athleticism, but added in that particular tone that manages to compliment and diminish simultaneously that she would need to develop more consistency if she wants to be a real force on the bigger stages. This after she had just performed with remarkable consistency against a top 10 player. The comment did not go unnoticed. Filipino fans were not quiet about it. They were never quiet about anything involving Eala, which is one of the things that makes her story so electric. She doesn't just have supporters, she has a community that is watching the tennis world's response to her with the same attention they're watching her matches. Social media became a battleground, as it always does. The clips kept circulating, the debates kept escalating, and somewhere in the middle of all of it, a question started forming that nobody had quite put into words yet. Was the resistance to fully crediting Eala's performance about tennis, or was it about something else? About a player from a country that the tennis establishment hadn't built its infrastructure for? About an Asian woman pushing into spaces where the sport's traditional power bases had never had to make room before? Nobody said it plainly, but everyone felt it. The post-match interview was short, maybe 4 minutes, and it became one of the most watched pieces of tennis footage that month. Eala sat across from the interviewer with the same composure she'd shown on the court, slightly flushed, eyes clear, not performing exhaustion, not performing elation, just present, just herself. When asked how she felt going into the match as such a heavy underdog, she paused for just a moment before answering. "I don't really look at those numbers," she said. "What matters to me is that I prepared well, I trusted what I worked on, and I went out there to play my game, not someone else's idea of what my game should be. Mine." Those last 4 words landed like a forehand winner. My game. Mine. In an era where young women athletes are constantly being told to play smarter, play safer, play within themselves, to be grateful, to be patient, to wait for their moment, Eala had walked onto a court against a top 10 player and played exactly the tennis she believed in. Not the tennis the percentages suggested, not the tennis the commentators prescribed, hers. She was then asked about the criticism that had already begun surfacing online, the suggestions that the result was exaggerated, that she'd been lucky, that it was too early to draw conclusions. She didn't get defensive, she didn't get sharp. She smiled, just barely, and said, "People are going to say what they say. My job is to keep playing tennis." Simple. Devastating. Perfect. What the camera didn't capture, but what people around her at that tournament later described, was the moment just before she walked out for the interview. She had been sitting in the locker room, still in her match kit, reading messages on her phone. Messages from the Philippines. Thousands of them. From children who wanted to play tennis now, from parents who told her their daughters had watched the match live in school, from former athletes who said she had reminded them why sport matters. She read them quietly, didn't cry, just nodded, set the phone down, and walked out to face the cameras. That, perhaps more than any forehand winner, tells you exactly who Alex Eala is. She also addressed the pressure of representing her country, something she has spoken about with remarkable honesty throughout her career. "I carry the Philippines with me every time I walk on the court," she said. "That's not a burden to me. That's my fuel." And then, after a beat, "I just wish people would let themselves believe in me the way my country does. That's all." The room went quiet, because she wasn't talking to the interviewer, she was talking to the tennis world. Here is the thing about Alex Eala that the statistics will never fully capture. She arrived at a moment in women's tennis that is more competitive, more global, and more scrutinized than any previous era. The tour has players from 47 countries in the top 200. The game is faster, heavier, and more athletic than it was 10 years ago. To break through in this environment, not just survive, but genuinely trouble the established order, requires something that goes beyond talent or training or even desire. It requires belief. Not the shallow kind that shows up on Instagram captions, the deep, structural kind. The kind that holds its shape under the weight of a packed stadium and a top 10 opponent and a world full of people who have already decided how the story ends. Alex Eala has that belief. She has always had it. What changed, what this match represented, was the moment the world was forced to reckon with it. For Southeast Asian tennis, the implications are significant. The region has produced great players, great moments, great stories, but a sustained top-level singles presence at the highest tier of women's tennis has remained elusive. Eala's trajectory is changing that calculus. Young girls in the Philippines, in Indonesia, in Vietnam, and Thailand, and Malaysia are watching a woman who looks like them compete at the highest level of their sport and refuse to be minimized. The ripple effects of that visibility are impossible to overstate. For the tennis establishment, the message is equally clear, whether or not they're ready to receive it. The sport is bigger than its traditional centers. The talent pool is global, and the players who are coming out of academies and national programs in non-traditional markets are not curiosities or feel-good stories. They are competitors. They are threats. They are the future. And for Alex Eala herself, still young, still climbing, still with the majority of her career ahead of her, this match is not the destination. It's a declaration. She is here. She has always been here. And the tennis world, all of it, the commentators and the ranking algorithms and the anonymous forum posters and the patronizing analysts, is going to have to get used to that. Because Alex Eala is going nowhere. One day, when historians of the sport trace the arc of women's tennis in the 2020s and look for the moments that defined the era's character, the moments that announced a new generation was ready to step into the light, they will find this match, this court, this young woman from Manila with ice in her veins and fire in her game. They will find her walking back to the baseline, bouncing the ball twice and serving, and they will ask themselves how they ever doubted her. And the only honest answer will be, we don't know. We just didn't see what was right in front of us. So here's a question worth sitting with, one worth leaving in the comments below. If Alex Eala can do this against a top 10 player today, what is the ceiling? And more importantly, is the tennis world finally ready to stop setting one for her?